before we go there, do you see you view Jimmy Carter as kind of this transitional figure between the New Deal and the neoliberal era? He has sort of his feet in both camps at different times during his presidency and moves forward with some deregulation, but also, backs up some old parts of the New Deal order as well. Do you see Biden in that same mold as a sort of transitional figure and as a kind of another coming of Jimmy Carter, whereas Carter was transitioning neoliberal to New Deal era, and there were some economic similarities between that time and now as well. And Biden is kind of that transitional figure on the other side.
He might be. There's a negative and positive way of viewing Jimmy Carter, and here I'm thinking in strictly politically strategic terms. I'm not thinking in ideological terms. Mm-hmm. I would judge his presidency largely on domestic grounds to be a failure, and there's no doubt that Biden faces the challenge now of his presidency regarded as being a failure. But even as it failed, one can see in Carter his setting down the roots of what is going to become a powerful neoliberal order in the 1980s and 1990s. He passed some of the earliest reform legislation pushing Congress in a neoliberal direction, and it's possible that Biden may be seen in a similar way, that his presidency in itself will be regarded as a failure, but that he grasped something about the moment and laid the foundation for a progressive political order that may only come into its own in another 5, 10, or 15 years. So we can see the parallels in both cases, the possibility of failed presidencies, but also a transitional figure. And here I'm using transitional figure in a positive sense rather than a negative sense. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying this to endorse neoliberal policy, but just to understand, I think progressives should study the ascent of the neoliberal order to power. It would help progressives a great deal to understand the challenges ahead of them in building a new progressive political order. And I can see how some of the things that Biden did in his first year may be looked upon in a few years as paving the way for progressive triumph, as hard as that is to glimpse right now, because part of the triumph has to be the ability to think outside the box, to think for a Democratic Party in ways that have not been thinking for some time. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt that there was a breakout moment in the first half of 2021 for the Democratic Party. And it may be in 5 or 6 years that this is looked back upon as the beginning of a progressive movement that's going to gel into something much larger and much bigger and dominant, as hard as it is to grasp at this moment of depression and distress in the Democratic Party.
Well, because there's no guarantees that what comes after neoliberalism is anything that looks progressive or lefty at all, because the Republicans are, the right is crafting their own thing to come after the neoliberal order. Trump is somewhat of a representative of that, although I think in certain ways he governed more like a, traditional sort of Reagan conservative than some of his own supporters expected. But I'd be curious for your view of the Trump presidency and how much it represented a break from the neoliberal order versus a continuation with some sort of, populist language layered on top.
I decided to write this book in 2016. It was the twin shocks of Trump and Brexit. I'm an American living in Britain. I teach American history. I follow things in America all the time.